On tonight's episode of Mr. Norris's In Case You Missed It, we're going to look at a couple things. The election of 1828, Andrew Jackson's spoils system, and his kitchen cabinet. Buckle up! Hey, hi, hello, and what is up, everybody? It's your host, Mr. Norris, the history teacher with the good hair. Tonight we're going to be talking about Andrew Jackson's rise to power. Yes, if you remember my last video, we talked about the election of 1824, where he was defeated by John Quincy Adams during the corrupt bargain. And right after that election, Andrew Jackson pretty much vows revenge and sets his eyes for 1828. So we're going to start with the election of 1828. Basically, right after 1824, Andrew Jackson and his supporters form their own party. They break away from the Democratic Republicans, and they form the Democratic Party. Yes, that's right, the current day Democratic Party, and really start campaigning right after that election. The campaign of 1828 is very interesting. The two people that run are John Quincy Adams again, the sixth president who won in 1824, against Andrew Jackson. And probably the most notable aspect of the election of 1828 is all the mudslinging that goes on back and forth between the two candidates. They really, really don't like each other. And when you look at them on the surface, they are absolutely two complete opposites. John Quincy Adams is super well educated. He is super prepared. He's basically been groomed since he was a child to eventually be president. And Andrew Jackson, on the other hand, is, this wild backwoods frontier brawler military guy. And just they come from two totally different backgrounds. Well, mudslinging gets pretty deep and pretty bad during the election of 1828, back and forth between the two candidates. It's interesting because a lot of the things that Andrew Jackson's side says about John Quincy Adams is very much not true. A lot of the things that John Quincy Adams' side says about Andrew Jackson is extremely true, such as that he married his wife before she was divorced from another man, that he has, literally shot people in duels before and killed them. That was all brought up about how he shouldn't be president. But really, when it comes down to it, the people's vote was going to depend on what kind of man they wanted in the White House. Did they want John Quincy Adams, the writer, or did they want Andrew Jackson, the fighter, right? And part of Jackson's campaign, they actually literally said, Adams is the man who writes, Jackson is the man who fights, meaning that Jackson is going to be your guy. He's going to fight for your rights. As far as the actual election goes, it's not much of a contest. It's a landslide victory for Mr. Andrew Jackson, and he becomes our seventh president in 1828. He gets about 60% of the popular vote, over 60% of the electoral votes, and wins in pretty easy fashion. So does he get his revenge after 1824? The answer is yes. And all of his supporters are thinking, yes, 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 yes. And he's got a massive following in the country, especially after his success in the War of 1812. His inauguration is a very interesting story. Basically, another big part of the reason why Jackson won is he ran on a policy of Jacksonian democracy. And he preached that to his supporters and to people around the country. And basically what that means is that this new government that he's going to set up is going to be of common people, by common people, for common people. He's telling them, I am one of you, you average farmers out there, poor people in society that maybe in the past haven't been able to vote and have been looked down on. Now in 1828, you are able to vote, and this government is going to be for you, by you, because you've elected me. So that really plays a big part into him becoming president. But his inauguration is really funny. The people are so excited that Andrew Jackson has been elected that about 15,000 people swarm Washington, D.C. for the inauguration and the festivities afterwards. Now, White House security back then was a lot different than it is today. Nowadays, if you're standing at the front gate, just even looking in the White House, you probably have like snipers on the roof looking at you like, what is this guy up to? Take him down, take him down. Whereas back then, you could pretty much walk up to the front door, knock on it, come on in. It was just a different time. So these 15,000 people after the inauguration and Andrew Jackson's speech and everything flocked to the White House for the festivities. It gets so crowded in the White House that 2 or 3 different times, Andrew Jackson feels like he's going to be crushed to death. And he actually has to leave his own inauguration party and go stay in a hotel. White House staff was so concerned about the structure of the building and whether or not it could maintain all of these people that they took all the free food and drinks and moved them out into the lawn. And people were so excited and clamoring to get to these free food and drinks that they literally started jumping out of the White House windows. Yeah, the White House literally looked like a scene from Animal House, all right, if you can imagine that. All of these upper class political elites that were worried about a guy like Jackson getting elected, who they considered kind of a savage, when they saw this day one of him taking office, they're like, oh God, oh no, who did we just elect? Who did we just elect, right? They're extremely worried. But it just shows you how much the average person in the United States back then adored the man. They loved him. They flocked to come and see him because they bought into his ideas of Jacksonian democracy. And one thing that you can say about Andrew Jackson is he really does change the face of democracy in the United States, right? That American dream that we have, that literally you can rise from nothing and become president, well, it kind of starts with Andrew Jackson. Now, let's get into some of his policies, his early policies, and we'll be a little bit critical of some of these policies. The first one that we have to touch on is the spoil system. There's my dog barking in the background there. He hates the spoil system too. Chance. I think he's done now. Okay. The first thing we have to talk about is the spoil system. And basically what that was is when Jackson took office, he fired a great deal of people that worked for the federal government. He fired and replaced about 10% of all federal government workers. That's about 900 people. Now, why is firing that amount of people such a problem? Well, for one thing, it seemed that Andrew Jackson was taking bribes or doing political favors as he was running for president. Basically, he was having people pledge support for him, and in exchange, once he became president, he would give them a job somewhere in the federal government. And really, that's not the way that you should conduct business, or especially if you're going to be a higher up inside of our system. It should be a merit-based system, which leads me to the other big problem with the spoil system. A lot of the people that Andrew Jackson fired or replaced in the federal government were good, honest workers that did really nice work. However, they weren't Jacksonian Democrats. They weren't people that supported Andrew Jackson. They weren't yes men, if you will, right, that he's going to surround himself with. The people that he was replacing them with, the people that he was appointing, were not necessarily the most qualified people. So he's firing people that are really good at their job and doing good work in government, and just replacing them with his buddies who don't necessarily deserve the job and also maybe gave him support or bribes in exchange. It's a shady system, and unfortunately, he kind of starts it, and it survives in American politics for a long time. Unfortunately, in some cases, we still deal with it today. So thanks for that, Andrew Jackson, and Chance, thanks you too. The next thing that we got to talk about with Andrew Jackson is his kitchen cabinet. His first term is full of turmoil, and a lot of Andrew Jackson's first term turmoil comes from infighting inside of his own cabinet, and it winds up becoming a whole incident and affair. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but kids, if you want to look up the Eaton affair, one of Andrew Jackson's cabinet members, John Eaton, the whole issue stems from that, and basically sides are divided over people that support Eaton and don't support John Eaton and some of the things that he's doing. Well, Andrew Jackson, by the end of his first term, winds up replacing virtually everybody in his cabinet except Martin Van Buren. So what is his kitchen cabinet? Well, while he's in the process of replacing his first cabinet members, he starts meeting with a group of officials and close advisors and buddies, if you will, that aren't elected officials. And he starts meeting with them in the middle of the night and most frequently in the White House kitchen. Sounds pretty cool. Make some policies, eat some chocolate cake. I'm down with that, all right? But yeah, he's meeting with people that aren't elected officials, again, yes men in the kitchen, and coming up with policies. And why does this seem to be a problem? Well, the press gets wind of this, and it just looks like the president is doing shady, sneaky kind of things. You know, if he's meeting with these people in the middle of the night to discuss something, it seems that you have something to hide, right? So yeah, again, not necessarily a great thing. And it's something that his political enemies that he had a lot of, especially upper class kind of people, political elites at the time, it gives them ammo to attack him, right? That he must be up to something. So there you have it. Right there in one video, you have the good aspects of Andrew Jackson, the guy that came from nothing and could inspire an entire nation to get into politics and to start following a political candidate, right? That's the good part of him, expanding democracy. And then you have the bad stuff at the end there, kind of his power hungriness and how he can be very manipulative with the spoil system in his kitchen and cabinet. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, or subscribe. Remember that history is life. And in the words of George Washington, the surest basis for public happiness is knowledge. So go out there and get some. Have a good night, everybody.